And we're live. Hey everybody, welcome to the After Dark Tech Talks. But it's
I don't even know what we're
not
laughing
about
about.
the COVID-19.
All right, starting over.
What a way
All right.
to start.
All right, although we're live, we're going to start that over because that was funny. Oh my goodness.
Hold on, I gotta stop you right here because you know what? We're doing this right now. Everybody pay attention to Mike. Because when Mike laughs, he laughs like a Muppet, and it's hilarious.
Like a Pez dispenser. His neck goes back.
It's Terrence and Philip.
Terrence and Philip. Oh, the Canadians. Canadians.
All right, sorry. Okay.
All right. So,
do it again.
welcome
Love how
to
professional
our...
we're starting this.
Listen,
out.
he doesn't have to mute himself when he laughs either. It's
Just... Oh. All right.
Can we start
can
over again?
Yeah, let's just start over with start off right.
Okay. Welcome to confinement, everybody.
Yeah.
and what it does to us.
Delicious.
No, we're like this all the time.
Yeah, no, it's no different.
All right. Let's do this again.
All right, so
Let's go.
welcome to the After Dark TED Talks about tech, but not about the coronavirus. We're talking about all kinds of stuff, except for the coronavirus part. So
It's totally not about the coronavirus
yeah.
at all.
So we're going to start off about my coronavirus experience. I'm kidding. We're not going there. So we actually got quite a bit going on tonight. So we're going to cover some of the topics that were covered in the Tech Talks that happened at Vision. I actually didn't get to be there. But Brian, Bryn, Rich, they were all there. All had some... I think you guys all presented there. So that was very cool. I unfortunately missed that, so I had to watch a recording. Thanks, Brian.
What were you doing?
Oh, yeah, nothing. Chilling out at the other hotel. Standing around. No mask tonight, Carlos. So, I'll let Bryn kick this off. He's got more information about what we're going to... He's actually over there. There we go. Over there.
He's up.
Well, on my screen. What
Most
kind of...
important screen.
Yes. So, Bryn, why don't you introduce what we're going to be talking about? I think it's going to be kind of interesting.
I would love to. Thank you, Keith.
And our special guest, of course.
Oh, we do have a special guest.
We do have a special guest. I'd like to see him, though.
Me too.
I think he'll come. I think he'll
Chad,
be on board.
Chad, tire pressure monitor.
Anyone that sticks around long enough will definitely come.
Jesus Christ.
So we aren't going to talk about the coronavirus, but we are going to talk about the coronavirus. Basically, what we want to talk about is, just trying to look at the silver lining and everything. And in this case, what was really cool, we all agreed, we were talking about it earlier, is how much learning opportunities there are now. It's almost overwhelming. We're inundated with these webinars, and it's really cool. These training companies are doing their part to make sure that we don't go crazy sitting at home, isolated from everyone. And we're learning some great things from these guys. So thank you very much. And by the way, a lot of them are free, but if it's not free, you're not getting ripped off. Stop it. A $30 webinar. These people are getting hammered. Like training companies, just like so many other businesses out there, they're done right now. Like they're dead in the water, and they make money by putting butts in seats in classes, and those classes aren't happening. So if they charge $30 to put a webinar together or whatever it is, don't be hating on them, man. They're doing what they can. So anyways, the webinars are really cool. We all agree it's been really cool being able to just chill out at home. It's almost makes me not want to go back to classes.
Hey, stop. Don't say that. I have to have something to look forward to. Like going back to work.
The webinars are cool. Like what I talking to Jim Kokonis today, the one thing that is kind of a bummer sometimes when you're in actual classes, you do have some participation, but sometimes it's hard to get participation. These webinars, man, there's a ton of participation. People are a lot more confident. They're asking questions. They're bringing really cool, valuable pieces to the classes. So it's really cool. If you're not taking advantage of these things, definitely do so. You can usually find them on diag.net or Facebook groups, but Brian has done an amazing job on our website, he would like to be the hub of all things webinar right now. So he's done a really good job of putting those on our website. So look, which tab is it? Is it on the main page, Brian?
There's a button on the main page to get to the tab that I have.
Is it
Yeah,
called
you just
events?
click more
There's-
over at the top right-hand side. There's a more drop down, and then
Yeah,
there's
also
a webinars link.
on the home page, there's 4 buttons: one for local training, one for training events, one for webinars, and one for events that we are going to hold in the future.
Very cool. So check it out there. The other thing we'd like to ask your help basically is make sure that if we don't have something on there, let us know. I think, was it Jason Chavez, was it, I think, that
Yep.
already kind of shot out, gave us a shout out?
He told me about AVI, and that's already added on there now. And anyone else has anything, let me know.
Yeah. What about LMV Bavarian's Pico stuff that's on there?
They're doing one
That's on
right now.
Sorry.
Oh,
Justin.
there's really right now?
Justin.
Yeah, literally.
There's
right
there's
now.
like a webinar every day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's
There's
I have to tell you,
I think I counted 36 for the month of April so far that I've added.
I got to say
Wow.
that the demand for webinars has been so great. There's been some sites that have been crashing.
yeah.
Yeah.
That
30 and
it's
40
been
people jump
insane.
on and it just
right down. It's
Nah,
insane.
it's crazy.
Oh.
But
Moving on.
just to give us a kind of, if you guys aren't, for those of you that aren't aware, most of people who are watching are probably aware, but WTI, CTI, ATG, I think TST did something. What else? Some of the others, LMV Bavarian. In fact, WTI did one COVID-19 stimulus tonight
Just tonight.
8 to 9. So this is basically the after party for that. So thanks for joining us, guys.
And what about Brian?
Brian Mann?
Brian Mann in Ohio.
Yeah, he did one today,
Mhm.
and I'm sure he'll do more. In the
Hands
future.
on. We've been pretty good about calling out Brian Mann. We forget to always talk about his training.
I was just talking to him about that today. That he started the hands-on type of training, and then immediately forced to not do hands-on training.
Yeah.
Isn't he local to you?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, he's on the west side of Cleveland. I'm on the east side. So.
Yeah.
If we could just convince Brian to also bring back his YouTube channel that had plenty of subscribers and people following him along also.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just added. I took all my programming walkthroughs that I had and put them on a free training tab on my website. I figured I'd jump on the free training board as well. So
Nice.
Cool. No, it's really cool. I mean, everybody's doing a great job of making sure we don't go crazy and we're keep learning. So that's awesome. The other thing we wanted to ask you guys, like, the other silver lining sometimes, and hopefully you're taking advantage of it, right? We can't go anywhere and do anything. I'm hoping that some folks, maybe building better relationships with their families, the ones that they're stuck in the house with, or you have like projects that you're getting to, and we were kind of hoping you guys would, in the chat, let us know what you've been up to.
Who's doing home renovations with
probably,
me? I know I am.
Renovating a home and a van.
Regret asking you guys, I'm guessing, but I was hoping Chad would be ready to go. We wanted to talk finally before we move on to the main reason we're here. We wanted to talk briefly about the class that we scheduled for Chad. Chad was hosting us to come out to do the hands-on Snap-on Scope class in March. Obviously that got postponed, and we'd love to tell you we have a date at this point, but things are so crazy right now. We've decided to kind of get a better feel for what's the next few weeks and see how things go before we put a new date up there. And there's a lot of people that have already postponed their event, and they're starting to put dates up, and we want to make sure that we have a better idea of how this is going to pan out, but also what some of the reschedules are going to look like. But we'll definitely be out there as soon as we can, and we're going to have a blast doing it. So Chad, now that you're on, tell them where to go to keep an eye out. I know we'll be pushing it out in Facebook groups and stuff like that as well, but if they're interested in that rescheduled class, where should they go?
Oh, Chad, you're muted.
Chad.
I want you to know, by the way, he has a degree in AV technology.
at least he got his clothes put on.
I wanted to say before you started, Chad, you officially win for the best webcam setup ever. Keith, you can't do this anyway. Look what he does. Do that. That's what
Yeah.
I like the Oval Office. It's good.
Yeah.
sorry, Chad. All right.
Okay, I only caught the tail end of what Bren was saying about our class that we are rescheduling.
Basically, we don't even have a date yet, but when we do, how would they inquire other than, keeping an eye out on Facebook groups?
I mean, that would be the best way because we're going to share it out either on the Train by Text Facebook page or the Practical Mechanic Facebook page, or even on my YouTube. Once we have a date, it's going to get sent out to all those different locations. Otherwise, they could email me. Do you want me to give me my email on here?
It's up to you, man.
Well, we can also put it in the chat as well.
I'll try to remember to tell Brian to put it on our site too.
Yeah, I can do that.
Cool. No, we look forward to that. We were definitely bummed to miss that. Richard Falco and I were going to head out there and get that and have a good time out there. But man, it was kind of a tough call. It was a really tough call because it was right as this stuff started getting a little bit heavy, and we weren't really sure if we needed to take it seriously. This is kind of a weird stuff, right? Like you hear from some people like, oh man, they're over exaggerating, and other times, people are freaking out. So it's clear now that we need to take it seriously. Hopefully you guys are staying at home and doing your part to make sure, especially those guys, essential guys in the shops working on cars, you're taking the time to sterilize the cars before you work on them and sterilize them after for your clients. But anyways, we were bummed to have to do it, but we're going to have a great time when it's time to go back out there. So keep an eye out for it. Finally, the main reason we're here, the Vision Tech Talks we talked about last week. Most of you were probably here with us. Hey, you guys are so loyal, man. I love you guys. You guys were here last week. We talked about Vision Tech Talks. For those of you who don't know it, it was literally the best session ever. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I'm not really kidding. I thought it was awesome, but it was really cool. Matt Fanslow's idea. He gave it to Sherry Hamilton, the one that runs Vision Kansas City every year, High Tech Training Expo. And the concept was, instead of having, a traditional 3-4 hour training session, instead have several people do 20-30 minute presentations. And one of the main parts of this was, what they were expecting, the outcome that they were hoping for, was to give folks that have considered teaching, but maybe the thought of doing coming up with 3 or 4 hours of material for a class, or in fact standing up in front of people for 3 or 4 hours would be intimidating and overwhelming. It would be a great opportunity for folks like that to just put 20 or 30 minutes of material together and stand in front of the industry's best for 20 or 30 minutes. It was really, really cool. Like, we were all a bit concerned with time because we were told 20 minutes, and every one of our presentations was, I believe everyone was definitely over 20 minutes. So we were all a bit concerned with time, which is why I was talking like the Micro Machines guy when you guys do see my presentation, because we're going to share it. But before we share it, we thought it would be really cool to kind of recreate it here. So the reason there's so many reasons it's cool, but really, and when I say some of the industry's best were there, they really were. Like, there was people that we have been looking up to for years were in the audience, and it was intimidating, but the energy was really, really awesome. We had an amazing time, and it was something I'm very excited to be a part of. But again, we want to recreate it here before we share the video that we have. And so tonight, Brian Culata and Richard Falco, they both presented during the Tech Talk session, and they're going to present tonight what they did during the Tech Talk session. So without further ado, unless you guys...
I got one thing to say.
Okay.
One thing to say.
No. Oh, no.
First of all, Brent kind of glossed over the fact that he was talking really fast. And by I mean really fast was really, really fast. So like, I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this, but sometimes YouTube screws with your settings, and maybe you don't realize you've been watching videos on 0.5 speed for so long. But it's like when you finally reach that moment when you realize you're watching a video at 0.5 YouTube speed, and then you put it to normal speed, and it makes all kinds of sense. That was like Brent teaching in front of class. It was like, oh my god,
No, I
like
think
where did this guy come from?
it was more like a 2.0, not a
Yeah,
not
it
a,
was,
not a
might have been
It's like
2.0.
it's like Brent went in the bathroom, did a bump real quick, and then came right out.
Oh, jeez.
Jesus.
No, let me defend myself real quick here. I am from the South, and it takes me for a while to get the wheels moving normally. But they told us 20 minutes, man, and my presentation was easily 30 minutes. No matter how many times I practiced it, I could not get it to 20 minutes. And I think, would you guys agree that you were all in the same boat?
We were all.
I practiced mine probably, I don't know, 20, 30 times. And then each time it was like 25 minutes, 30 minutes. And I could never get it below 20.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking about that when I'm presenting. I'm like, man, I gotta go fast. So I understand.
And you guys probably did the same. Like you're doing the math. Okay, this thing's 2:45 to 5:45. We're gonna have a break, like, and then you do 7 presentations. You start doing it. And you're like, God damn, we really don't have much more than 20 minutes. So when I was practicing, I was talking like the Micro Machines guy, and it just came out. But the other part of it is, literally, the best in the industry were there. It's very intimidating for me, anyways. So
For all of us.
that was pretty much part of it.
I've never seen Brent so animated in my life. It was great. That dude's got a talent. But anyway, sorry to hijack the show. Brian, I'm sorry, man.
Brian, would you like me to introduce the topic? Or you want to just go straight to it?
Go ahead. I don't care. Whatever.
Brian's, everybody's was amazing, man. Like everybody's thing was, I was expecting more just people coming up and having a case study and kind of showing how cool they were at diagnosing this car. Everybody's case study had kind of like a twist or just really cool stuff. As Keith swats away these giant mosquito dinosaurs there, I think he's trying to wave to me and tell me something. Brian's was really cool, and I think it's really quite funny, the two that we chose tonight, and you'll see why. But Brian's is very, very cool. It was titled what? Quick tips?
Powerful 5-minute quick test. Powerful 5-minute quick tests.
Powerful 5-minute quick test. Some of the stuff that he's going to show you, I know that there have been a few folks that are doing it, have been doing efficient stuff like this in the past, but I don't think on this level. Like what I was able to see him do with such a quick scope test was pretty remarkable. So with that, fire away, buddy.
All right. Let me share my screen here. All right, you guys see that?
Yep.
Alrighty. All right, yeah. So my presentation was on powerful 5-minute quick test, and kind of what I mean by that is tests that you can perform that yield lots of information, but may not take lots of time to accomplish. One of the most common ones that most of you are probably aware of is like a relative compression test. That's not quite what I'm going to explain to you because a lot of us already understand that. But the fundamental principles of that relative compression test can be applied to multiple circuits on that vehicle. Actuators, outputs, anything that has some type of significant current draw, fuel pump, blower motor, something like that. This test can apply to that. Now, this test offers a health report, if you will, of the overall condition of the components that are on that circuit. Very similar to how a relative compression test is. You're looking to see how each one of the cylinders affects the capture. And that's kind of what we're going to explain here. Now, my favorite version of this test is what I call a relative coilover plug ignition test. Let's say a customer comes in, the engine's running rough, the check engine light is flashing. You go ahead, pull the vehicle in, pull codes. There's a P0303 cylinder 3 misfire, and you're sitting there in the seat of the car, and you can feel a dead misfire. It's pretty obvious. And let's fast forward. Let's just go ahead and say that our scan data analysis has led us to believe that there may be an ignition-related misfire. So we want to begin testing the ignition system. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is the relative ignition coil test. And to begin that, we're going to find the common wire. Now, when you go to most coil over plug ignition systems, you'll notice that every single ignition coil usually has a similar color wire. In this case, there is a common color red wire on every single coil. That's the wire that I'm going to be concerned with. Now, because we know that, it may not be necessary to consult a wiring diagram. That in itself is a time saver. And because of that, it does not matter which coil we choose. Because this is similar to a relative compression test, each coil should affect the circuit the same way. And that's what we're going to be looking at to see if there's anything that looks different.
Hey,
Hey,
Brian.
Brian, I'm sorry to pause you for a second there. I think everybody else was going to say the same thing. They're asking if you can bring that up to 100% on the size of the screen. If you can size that up a little bit, because it comes up only as about.
It's a tiny little
corner of the
box in
screen,
the middle.
It should be in your view options up top on your Zoom.
Sorry, I was talking. I muted myself. 100% is too big. 50% is slightly larger than what you've got. So something on your end.
Got it. We're good.
Where is that at?
I mean, I've got it to be pretty good sized on YouTube's end, but
It's fine. 50% works.
I'll leave it at this. If there's not enough shown, oh, whatever you did, don't do
Whoa.
that. Put that back.
Yeah, go do the other thing.
Wherever you were at, put it back.
Is that better?
All right, yeah, just leave it there. That's full screened. It may be too big. It may cut off something, but
I think it's
That
because
looks like it's good right here.
I think it's because I have 3 monitors and it's set as one desktop. I think that's why.
yeah.
So, but anyways, if you feel it's good enough, I'll continue. We good?
Yeah,
Looks good.
Yeah,
go
we
ahead
can
with
make it
that.
work.
And
All right, so back to the test here. All right, so we're going to be finding the common wire and we're going to be sampling that wire. So we're going to go ahead and make our connection. Again, we're going to find that red wire and we're going to scope it. It doesn't matter which coil we're going to choose. As long as we choose one of them, that's all we need to know. And you're going to get a capture that looks like this. And you may be telling yourself, Brian, what the hell are you showing me? You got one big ugly mess on the screen. I can't see much of what's going on. Doesn't really make sense to me. This again is the ignition coil shared B+. You can see that it's resting at 14 volts. The vehicle is running, and it looks like a bunch of noise on the screen. Now, do we AC couple or not? Scope setup is critical for this test. One of the best explanations that I've ever heard was from Bryn Klein. He's here with us today. He explained at the Super Saturday event that he had an awesome analogy for DC coupling and AC coupling. He explained that DC coupling is like looking at the entire depth of the ocean, from the ocean floor at 36,000 feet all the way up to the very top. Now, when you do that, the change in voltage or the waves of the ocean kind of get diluted by how much of the ocean that you're measuring. So you don't get to see that change in voltage it's not exaggerated on the screen. So we need a way to exaggerate that change in voltage or look at the waves of the ocean. So should we AC couple? AC coupling is like the marine forecast of the ocean. We're not necessarily concerned with how deep the ocean is. We're just concerned with how big the waves are. These waves will be represented on a screen hunting the zero line on our capture. Now, filtering, AC coupler or not, vertical enhancements, those are all things I'm going to cover here in just a moment. But those are all critical settings that are required to be used on your scope. First things first, I'm using a pico scope here. Again, I am not AC coupled in this capture. I am DC coupled. I went ahead and I had to choose and activate. I had to turn on the filtering setting. So to do that, choose on the channel that you're scoping and go ahead and turn activate filtering on. Now, keep in mind when you filter a capture, in my opinion, picoscope kind of filters pretty heavily, and you may need to adjust the sensitivity or the power of that filtering by choosing the setting right here. So get it to represent what you kind of want to see on the screen, like what we have here, and filter out all of that noise that you used to see in the capture that I had prior. Again, this is the same capture that I had previously, it's just filtered. The next step that I like to do is play with the vertical enhancements. Now, at the bottom of the screen here, you may be able to see that it's times 10. I went ahead and I changed the vertical scaling of this capture. Now, at the bottom here, your individual channel options allow you to have vertical scale adjustments for each channel. And when you do that, you can essentially exaggerate the change in voltage. You can see the waves of the capture more exaggerated on the screen, and that's what we're going to be looking at here. So I went ahead and I zoomed in a little bit to see what's going on. And right away, you can see a repeatable failure. You can see that there are 7 downward spikes, and then there's 1 missing event. Like the voltage is hunting a little bit, but the most valuable part of it, the most valuable piece of information here is the fact that there is 1 missing pulse. Now, are we going to assume that is cylinder number 3 misfire, or should we properly sync our scope so we can prove that that cylinder is the one that is affected? We're professionals, so we have to make sure that the appropriate coil or circuit is causing this problem. So we need to sync our scope. Now, just like the voltage feed to the ignition coils, it may not be necessary to know which coil you're on, or it may not be necessary to know which coil you choose. It wouldn't matter. As long as you know which coil you're on, go ahead and sample the trigger wire to that coil. Now, you have to be careful when you do this, because with the 2-wire coil, you have to protect your scope. Attenuation may be required because you may have to deal with an inductive kick that's over 400 volts that's possibly could damage your scope. So if you're using a picoscope, go ahead and attenuate that channel and go ahead and protect that scope. I have on here the firing order. I am synced to number 2, and this is just a basic firing order: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And sure enough, number 3 is missing. Are we done? This test can only provide you an overall health report of how each coil is affecting that circuit. Very similar to how each cylinder will affect a relative compression waveform. This is a general test. This is basically a test that's going to guide you to the next test in your diagnostic process. Further testing is necessary to confirm why this coil is not with us today. Now, testing was performed on the control side of the circuit, and I found that the PCM had a failed ignition coil driver within the PCM. Cylinder 3 had a shorted coil, which ultimately caused damage to the PCM. It's fairly common on Ford products, which this vehicle just happened to be. So again, are we done yet? Let's go ahead and rewind. The waveform, I went ahead and inverted to simulate a low amperage current draw that you would normally do to an ignition coil. Now, those of you that have low amped ignition coil, is there anything that you see on the screen of value? Chris, anybody?
I see all kinds of good stuff, but I would like to backtrack a little bit if you could.
Sure.
You glossed right over that you inverted it, and you can see what looks to be an amp clamp reading. Why is that? Why is that, Brian?
Because amperage and voltage work hand in hand. When you have an actual load on the circuit, the voltage feed will be affected as well. They work hand in hand. So because we know that, it may not be necessary to grab a low amp probe, because I can do that without having to go grab my low amp probe or look up to see where the fuse is, find a fuse loop, all those things that you have to do to low amp a circuit. It can be kind of time consuming to do that. Now,
So are you saying you're using Ohm's law to your advantage right here?
absolutely.
Oh, wow.
basics electric class is
So as you're saying, the reason you inverted it is because when amperage rises, voltage drops.
yeah, and because I inverted it, it looks very it's more familiar for people that have low amp in ignition coil before. You see an upward motion of a drawing on the screen.
That's a hell of a tip. All right.
Do you see anything of value in the screen other than the obvious missing pulse?
That other coils don't look too healthy.
Well, you were there, Rich.
Well, so was I, so I
I'm
can't say
trying to
anything.
help. So I'm trying to help here.
Well, I wasn't there, and I was not there, and I see excessive current or excessive voltage drop on a few. Also, traditionally, as a 3-strike, at below 1800 RPM, when it does a multi-strike, you usually see the maximum current, middle current, lower current, kind of like we see on the first and second and third and fourth on the first ones here. So that's pretty normal, but then the fifth and sixth that we see, fifth one we see is an issue, and current tends to rise as the coil got heated up, and then the voltage drop on that last one seems way higher than the rest. So I see quite a bit there.
Yeah, there is a lot going on here. If I were to zoom in a little bit on just the coil that I'm synced to, which I think I have a capture of, I didn't zoom in on, but you'll notice that the peaks are not the same. And if you zoom in, I don't think I have it zoomed in this PowerPoint, but you'll see that the upward motion of that ignition coil is much vertical. That coil's shorted. However, number 2 is
There's
not.
no build.
Yeah, number 2 is not misfiring. So if I were to let this car go with a new PCM and a new coil on number 3, potentially number 2, which is not misfiring right now, could completely short out and damage that brand new PCM that I just put in. All because I didn't do this health report in the beginning. If I were to go straight to number 3, skipping the step altogether, all this information I could have missed on. Now, to prove a point, what do you want to say, Keith?
I was going to say it looks like 4 and a couple of the other ones are the same way.
Absolutely, yeah. To prove a point of this test being valid, I went ahead and I looked up a winding diagram to figure out which fuse I needed to low amp the ignition coils. It's a Ford product, so of course the fuse block is not labeled. And I went ahead and found my low amp loop, which I love, from AES Wave. Went ahead and grabbed my low amp probe, clamped my fuse loop, zeroed my probe, set up the scope, all that. And then I get a capture that looks like this. Again, this is more zoomed in. You can see on the right side of the screen here, the upward motion of this coil is.
Oh, yeah.
It's a bad coil. It's not misfiring, but it's a bad coil.
Kind of awesome.
Yeah. So
really cool if you have like a 1-channel scope and you only got one test you could do.
Sure. And like I said, this is a health report. We're looking at the overall condition of how each one of the ignition coils affects that circuit. They all should be affecting it pretty much the same way. And that's what I'm hoping to see.
Awesome.
Now, to wrap up, find a common wire, set up your scope to the appropriate coupling settings. If you're using a snap-on scope, I forgot to say this in the beginning, but go ahead and AC couple your scope. If you're using a pico scope, because of the vertical scale adjustments that you can do, it may not be necessary to AC couple your scope. You still can, but because you have those vertical enhancements, you can still maintain the DC component of the waveform while still being able to exaggerate the change in voltage to make this test possible. Go ahead and acquire your signal, manipulate the waveform if you need. Analyze. And what I mean by analyze is don't look at the first thing you see. We saw there was a missing event, but go ahead and look at everybody else. Again, this is a health report. Let's just say you're having a party and all your friends are there and you want to make sure everybody's having a good time. Go to all your friends, say, "Hey, how you doing? I know you're here, but are you doing all right?" That's kind of what this test is. You're making sure everybody's there and how are they behaving? How are they doing? And then if you find any anomalies with that first capture, go ahead and sync at that point and then find where those anomalies are.
Really awesome test, Brian. That's like really awesome.
It is.
Thank you.
And I'm not sure. I'd like to think that I would pick up on those shorted coils, but I'm not sure. It's a good. He's
Yeah,
a good eye.
and I'm not suggesting you do not low amp ignition coils. I'm just saying that this test that works really well and it's very fast. You're literally probing one wire in the very beginning. Now, if that doesn't work for you, and you're more comfortable with low amping an ignition coil, that's perfectly fine too. It just takes a little bit more time.
Well, like in your case, you just wanted to back it up and you did so. And that's the thing. Like if this super quick, simple, really quick test, you could do something. And if you see any evidence that you need to dig a little deeper, then you can. So
Absolutely, yeah.
pretty awesome. It's really awesome to, when you, gosh, I'm drawing a blank, inverted the capture. It's really cool. I mean, there's such a direct correlation with voltage drop and current flow, or current flow and voltage drop. It's really cool when you invert how much it looks like a current ramp. It's pretty awesome.
It's almost like it's a law.
So Brian,
Yeah.
how did you sell that to the customer?
What's that?
How did you sell that to the customer, Brian?
I'm a technician. I don't sell things.
Yeah.
Good question, Rocco.
Rocco, how's it going, Rock?
I'm good.
It is a good question.
So how? Well,
Don't you-
that brings up a good. That brings up a good
I was
point.
going to say that. Yes.
How is a health check like that sold to the customer at your shop, Brian?
Well, we when they have a drivability concern, we'll generally
Sell them all the coils.
sell them everything, and then
Yeah.
if it
I
doesn't
get a
fix
PCM
it,
too. It's a Ford.
yeah. But yes, that was another point that I did not mention before is because we had obvious evidence of one coil that's bad, and then I had evidence of a coil that was on its way out. Don't you think my sales approach to selling those ignition coils would be much more influenced by having more data? I know I got at least 2 coils that are bad. How about we go ahead and sell all 8 of them?
It's not only going to give you your sales team confidence to sell those other ones, but it also helps to build value in that diagnostic charge that you sold them to begin with, right? When you have, not
Sure.
that they're going to understand these scope captures, but if you can quickly annotate them, it's like, at least that's better than what they normally get, right? They get nothing normally.
Sure. Now this car was a high mileage car. I don't know if you guys noticed, but the picture I had of the ignition coils, you could see there was a white coil, there was a black coil, there was a yellow coil, there was a gray coil. So this car has had many
United
coils.
coils of Benetton.
So it's been done, many times before. It's a Ford. This is a Crown Vic. Very common system, very common failure. But
2-wire coils, Fords are only called cherry if they have original
Yeah.
equipment coils on them.
yeah. So. But yeah, that's my point. Is if you have one that's obviously bad, you have a second one that's on its way out. That is pretty significant leverage to do what it probably should have by replacing all of the ignition coils to make sure that we do not have another PCM driver that fails.
Any questions? We're getting any questions or comments? I mean, I can't figure. I'm not
Well, we got a lot of people saying hi to Rocco. So Rock, say hi to everybody. Wants to say hi to you.
world famous.
Good to know we got a rock star on the screen.
Howdy. Hello.
Oh my God, it's a different kid.
Right? Where's the voice, right?
Oh,
There it is. There you go.
God. Don't make me self-conscious. I'm in front of
I didn't think that was possible, Rocco.
So the way I see it is if you can take that quick capture and let it lead you to your diagnostic process, it's not necessarily something you're gonna charge the customer for because it's normal during your normal diagnostic process. But if all of them look the same, then you may say, okay, I need to jump straight into looking at my secondary captures
Sure.
instead of getting the amp clamp out and putting it around the fuse and looking at all that other stuff. So it could save you, 10-15 minutes right up front and lead you to the next step. Or if they all look the same and you're like, is it an ignition waveform or ignition problem, then maybe jump into your fuel system as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This is not an end-all be-all test. This is, again, a health report. This is one of the first tests that I like to do in the very beginning. And then once I have evidence from that test, move forward. If there's nothing conclusive from this test, go ahead and do something else. That is common.
We have a question in the chat. Katie Automotive says, what if you only saw evidence of one shorted secondary on one coil? Do you recommend all?
I
On a
typically
Ford,
do.
on a Ford?
I
Yeah.
was gonna say it depends on the car.
Honestly, most when you order a PCM, there'll usually be a sticker right on that PCM that demands you replace all of the coils. Otherwise, the warranty for that module is void. So
Well, I know from when I was working on European stuff, I always tried to sell all of the coils.
We almost always try, and it's never a hard sale. Like there's a mandatory, the ones that we're seeing evidence that are definitely bad, but we recommend all of them, and more often than not, they do it, which is great, because it, like in your case, had you not, I mean,
now,
had you
one
not,
bus jockey mentioned that with Pico, you do not need to AC couple, and I absolutely agree with that. I completely forget that the Pico scope can AC couple just because of all the things that you can do to the capture, not requiring you to AC couple.
right? Manipulating the capture
Yeah.
just with zoom alone.
Yeah, when you AC couple, you completely chop off the DC component of the waveform, and that's there's a lot of information on the DC part of the waveform.
So awesome. So that was a great talk. Do you want to move on, or do you want to keep on doing this? I know we were trying to keep this brief.
Well,
Whatever, I can talk.
it's 9:41. I guess we should probably. The next one is.
The next one's going to be how to not use your scope, which we've considered evicting Rich for.
Don't worry, half of YouTube's gonna
No, man.
kick me off right now.
I think Rich's presentation was really, really good. It's those moments you hear about people like sitting in the pews and they're like, "Is that dude talking only to me?" That's kind of the way I felt. I mean, and I think some of us we're such scope lovers that basically Richard is preaching directly to us. But
I also want to say that the whole Techtalks thing was really about getting somebody who wasn't quite prepared to do this full time or anything, and somebody who was just starting out. And they have Rich Falco, who is arguably the oldest member here.
The oldest. He has to get oldest in.
Yeah, the oldest one here, and somebody who makes his living teaching only. But yeah, go right ahead.
What you just said applied to me perfectly. This was the first time I've ever presented in front of any type of crowd, and I'm presenting at Vision in front of 20 industry giants. So it was an intimidating moment for me, but I thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity.
You nailed it.
So, and even Rich was a little nervous, I noticed.
Well, I was.
Oh,
You look out and you see instructors who you've sat in their classes for, 5 years, and you realize, oh God, now they're watching me. And
yeah, when Jim Morton is front and center judging you,
exactly,
silently judging you.
At least I wasn't giving him a hard time like Justin Morgan.
no, what did Jim was great though. What did
awesome.
Matt say last week? What is the word he used with regard to the presenters being a little bit nervous and most of us being pretty new at presenting? What did
endearing?
Endearing.
Or
and
annoying. I can't remember either one.
It was endearing. And I think it was, we talked about Brian mentioned 20 of the best in there, or 20, I don't remember what he just said, but
industry
just
giants.
To paint the picture for you guys, yeah, industry giants for sure. The room was a pretty good sized room, and it was packed. There was standing room only for quite a bit of the time in the back, so it was pretty cool. Just to kind of give you an idea, I think there was probably 100-ish, 110-ish is what we were thinking. So it was pretty neat. Just the vibe was really cool. But Richard's was really good. As you guys will see, and I mean that because I feel like he's speaking directly to me. So I'm just going to let him go for it because you guys can see what I'm talking about.
Wait, did you just sneeze, Rich?
No,
all right, you got to go. Okay.
Oh, I got it on me.
Everybody's infected. All right, are we ready? Are we ready to get everybody mad?
Yeah.
I'm a little mad already.
Let's see.
I did say that I thought you were backpedaling a little bit during your intro.
I was a little bit.
Let's go ahead and nail the point down right now.
I didn't want for there to be a mutiny and for me to get dragged out into the parking lot,
stoned,
given 40 lashes with AES wave leads. So
I I just want to stop you right. I just want to stop you right here, though.
Uh-huh.
Great size in your slide. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Thank you.
just fixed it.
Everybody can see that.
Yeah.
All
My
right.
bad.
Good. That's all right. So, yeah. So I'm gonna leave this screen up here for a while just to annoy some people. So, yeah, I'm not the new guy here. I teach 4 nights a week for the past close to 6 years. And at the end of all of my classes, guys get my phone number, they get my email, I encourage them to find me and friend me on Facebook.
Groupies.
And yes, and I'm encouraging guys to call me and give me their problems, their cars they're struggling with, and I might not be able to help them, but I got a good group of guys who I can bounce questions off of, and I don't want to just hand them a silver bullet, but I want to show them where to go get that information or help them with that car. And I know that a lot of my guys think I do that because I'm just an amazingly nice guy. But the real reason is they're helping me too. I'm seeing what guys are struggling with. I'm not in a shop every day. I'm a full-time instructor. So I get those questions and I see what guys struggle with. And as I'm helping them through problems, I'm seeing mistakes being made. And one of the more common mistakes that I see being made is the misuse of scan data.
Okay. I was going to say with the 2% of your students that are using scopes. No.
Yeah.
I also want to say something. I want to say something also.
Boy. I knew I wasn't going to get through this unscathed.
No, someone mentioned you had groupies. I just want to put it out there. We should name your groupies the Falconeers or the Falconers. All right. Sorry. That was a bad dad joke. Moving on.
So for the scope fanatics out there, bear with me. I'm not going to badmouth your precious scope. I just want to make the point that if we put as much effort into understanding and analyzing scan data that we do analyzing scope use, you'd be amazed at just how much information is there. And I've had a couple of people, Chris being one of them, say, yeah, if I don't like that scan data, I just move on. And I understand that point of view, but if you pulled out your scope and you hooked up your scope and you got a waveform that wasn't what you expected, you wouldn't just go, well, that's a useless test, let's move on. You would investigate why isn't that waveform right? Why doesn't it look the way I want it to look? Did I screw something up? Did I hook up incorrectly? Am I getting bad information? And if we did that with scan data, you might find out, oh wow, that data PID is false. My aftermarket scan tool is giving me bad information, or that even that factory scan tool is not displaying that data PID correctly, whatever it may be. And then you know to ignore it, but you might find that, oh wow, there really is something there. Because there's 2 mistakes that I see guys make over and over and over. And the first one I'm going to address with our first quick little case study here, and that is missing obvious bad data. Jim Morton, Brandon Steckler, Jim Kokonis, Peter Orlando. I've heard a bunch of great instructors out there say, look for the low-hanging fruit, look for the easy stuff, look for the obvious stuff. And a lot of times guys, they miss that stuff. Guys wonder, well, why doesn't my compressor kick on? I'm in the Southeast and I get a lot of phone calls about air conditioning problems, and had a guy with a 99 Chevy Silverado call me and say, yeah, we did a bunch of AC work and now the compressor won't kick on. Well, what's the scan tool say? Well, it's a 99, it's an old piece of junk Chevy truck. I don't know if there is any scan data. I promise you there's scan data. And there's 14 different data PIDs for why the PCM wouldn't turn the compressor on. And one of them is ambient temp, and his ambient temp sensor was -40, or it might have been his evap temp sensor. I can't remember on that one. But if you see a data PID that says it's -40 degrees and you're calling me from Miami, there's a problem. There's something obviously wrong there. So So look for the obvious stuff. I'm a little spoiled that I spend a lot of time in rental cars, and I always have my scan tool hooked up, and I am always looking at data PIDs. And since they're all late model cars, I'm looking at page after page of data going, what the heck is that? I've never heard of that abbreviation, never heard of that data PID before. And I go do a little bit of research, and sometimes I go, okay, well, I don't know what I would use that for. And sometimes I see data and go, wow, that's cool. I have to keep that in mind. So just like using your scope, you got to use your scan tool, and you got to understand that data. You got to look beyond just fuel trims, because you'd be amazed at just how much information is there. So let's jump into our first example here. Or maybe not.
You wanted to move away from that screen?
I think everybody wants to move away from that screen.
And we're
Say
done.
there's only 7 people left in the and mine is right here.
All right. So,
well, Chad's here actually. Chad, you do interactive case studies all the time, and everybody's pushing you to use scopes pretty much immediately.
That's always the first thing they want me to do.
So let me bring up, this is something I didn't do in the tech talks. When I'm in class, I'm pointing out diag.net and the good Facebook groups and the good YouTube groups, and I want guys to if they have a scope, I want them to use it, and I want them to get good and efficient with it. But there are so many people out there pushing nothing but scopes left and right that I have a lot of guys that, number one, they're depressed that they can't go out and buy a Pico master kit, and they'll send me waveforms and go, I'm sorry, it's a snap-on. It doesn't matter what scope you have, whatever scope you have and you're using, great. But I had one guy come to my class, and he's got his laptop, he's got an Autel scope, he's got at least 40 different waveforms for me to look at. And we're looking at cam and crank, and we're looking at secondary ignition, and I had to stop him in the middle of all these waveforms. And
listen, I really wanted to show you that stuff, man. You're hurting my feelings.
I said, what is this car, and what is the problem we're chasing? And he says it's a 99 Ford F-150 with a PO 171 174 code. So it's lean on both banks. Okay. And he shows me, secondary from all 6 coils, and he goes, what do you think? And I go, well, it's running lean. Now what? Well, I don't know what to hook my scope up to next. And I couldn't help myself, but I turned to him, I looked, and I said, you can hook the scope up to your nipples for all I care, because that's not where we're going to get the answer. What are fuel trims? I don't know. What are fuel trims at idle? What are fuel trims at 2,500 RPMs? I don't know. What was the freeze frame for the codes showing you the conditions for when it ran lean? I don't know. Did you hook up your scan tool to get the codes? Yeah. Then you jumped over a ton of information to get to your scope. And you spent a lot of time learning how to use that scope, and all that stuff is great, but it didn't bring you to the problem, because I don't know if the scope is going to find the cracked PCV hose at the back of the valve cover, or whatever it was. I don't remember, but that's the point. Is a lot of guys see the stuff online and say, the only way I'm going to be a good tech is if I'm using a scope, because that's flashy and that's cool.
With the ultrasonic, probe that you guys are working on, you could hear that vacuum leak.
Shh. We're not putting that out yet. That's coming. That's coming.
Jesus Christ, Brian. Jim, okay. I'm sorry, Jim. Brian ruined it for you.
Oh, that's coming in one of the CTI classes, hopefully. So anyway. All right. So this Ford Flex, 2009 Ford Flex shop called me out. Crank no start. They had already put 2 PCMs in it. So this shop doesn't do programming. They had to call a mobile guy out to program 2 PCMs, because the first one they put in was an advanced PCM, and that didn't fix it. So obviously defective parts. The second one is OEM, and when that didn't fix it, it's maybe it isn't the computer.
It was probably the guy that programmed it. He did it wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, the programming must have fell out.
That's it. Fell out. I like that.
Fell
That
out.
happens sometimes.
It does happen. So
That's
all right.
that's a story I'll tell some other time. But yeah, the programming must
So-
have fell out.
It fell out. Yeah. So, well, honestly, they thought that he didn't program the PATs correctly. There's got to be a security problem. Okay, so I get there, new PCMs installed, programmed, crank no start. I hook up my scan tool. Guy, the tech there goes, well, there's no codes. We already checked. Yeah, well, there's some data. Let me see what he got there. And his exact words to me were, well, just how much information are we going to get on an 11-year-old car? I'm not going to go through all the PIDs, but what you have scrolling through there was the data from this, just PCM data from this 11-year-old car. And I'm exaggerating. I think it's only like 260 data PIDs or something like that. But there's a lot of information.
Well,
so,
it is an Altel, so not half of them don't work.
Easy, yeah. Let me make fun of the tool, okay? I'm getting
Hey, you went really fast through that last slide. Can we see that again?
no. I'll touch upon the important ones here. So sticking with low hanging fruit, let's look for the obvious stuff. One thing that, and this goes back well before 2009, but Ford has been doing for a while, any relay that powers up a module or any module usually has a power feed and some type of a feedback circuit. And
Wait, isn't this the point you threw Tanner under the bus?
no, I'm going to throw Tanner under the bus in the next one. Don't worry, I'll get there. So we've got the PCM power relay here, and the PCM provides the ground that energizes and turns the relay on. But there is a feedback circuit so that the PCM knows that relay has actually worked. There is data PID for that. And the PCM power relay provides power to the rest of the vehicle, including the fuel pump relay. So if we go to the scan tool, come on, here we go. Towards the bottom there, module supply voltage, 11.69 volts. Key on, engine off, PCM's getting power. If we weren't sure about that data PID, you can hit the question mark or hit that little drop-down menu there and hit the question mark. And this parameter identifies the voltage supplied to the ECU and the rest of the vehicle by way of the power relay. Now, Autel is never the best with English, but that's pretty clear. That's surprisingly clear as to what that data PID is.
That's the best Changlish I've ever seen.
Exactly. Yeah. There's no adjustmenting or radar aiming or some of the other things that they butcher, but that one's pretty good. The PCM's getting power, or at least we can assume that on that one wire, PCM's getting power. So I asked the tech, why are we crank no start? Why'd we put the PCM in it? And he says, no injector pulse. Okay, well, here's our wiring for our fuel injectors. The main power relay provides power to the fuel pump relay. The fuel pump relay provides power on that purple wire down to a splice that has 7 wires coming off of it, supplying power to all 6 injectors and our feedback circuit, our injector V power circuit. So use the search feature on my scan tool. I just type in injector and I get an entire page of problems. Injector 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all showing yes fault. And at the very bottom there, injector power monitor, 0.02 volts.
That's enough.
Yeah, that's enough. So now I'm sitting in the car, I'm looking at this data, and I turn to the tech. Why do we have no injector pulse? What did you guys test this with? Well, annoyed light wouldn't flash. So
He's not wrong.
He's not wrong. Yeah, he's not wrong. Noid light doesn't flash, doesn't automatically mean PCM. So it's time to get out of the driver's seat. We're not going to fix the car for the driver's seat, but I have a direction as to where to go. And a quick visual inspection brings us to chewed wires. This was a Florida snowbird car that had sat for 6 months, and the rats or mice or whoever had a field day with wires. Would a good, thorough visual inspection had caught this problem? Yes. Would a scope have caught this problem? Absolutely. But right from the driver's seat, from the data available, we know where to go with our problem, or at least we have a direction as to go with our testing, whatever it may be. So look for the low hanging fruit as much as possible. Look for obvious data PIDs that don't make sense. And 0.02 volts to the injectors, to me, is a huge red neon sign saying we've got a problem. Now, I said one of the more common problems I see is guys missing obvious bad scan data. One of the other things that I see is guys not even knowing that the data is there, not even being aware that there are data PIDs available to provide them with a direction. I had a dealer tech say to me, yeah, I know I overlook scan data, but I feel like, the manufacturer I work for went from 50 to 500 data PIDs overnight. And he's not entirely wrong, because the amount of data available has just exploded, but he only works on one manufacturer. He should know a lot of those, at least. For us, for the typical independent repair shop tech, there's no way we could keep up with every car, every make and manufacturer. But we
Oh, you mean you have to learn one product line? I'm so sorry for you.
So what if you have the scan tool hooked up, if you've got an extra 5 minutes, look through the data. At the Autel, the Launch, I know other manufacturers' tools has a screen capture button. And if you see data that doesn't make sense and you don't have the time to investigate it right then and there, screen cap it and look it up later. It's in service information. I promise you, a lot of that is in service information. Toyota and GM do an amazing job of giving you a data list of everything, and oftentimes known good values.
I'm gonna blow up your spot right there, Rich. Try reading service information on anything German.
Shut up! I'm not talking Euro here.
And I'm gonna bow out.
I knew Chris was gonna beat me up on that one. Porsche. Porsche doesn't. We're not even gonna get into Porsche, but anyway. So look at what's there. Look at what's available. Which brings me to my next one, and this one will be really, really quick. I was collecting data for an air conditioning class. I had a known good 2017 Subaru Impreza, and I'm just screen capping things, and there's a lot of interesting stuff there. And then I'm looking for air conditioning stuff, but one specific thing jumped out at me, and I will say I'm not a Subaru guy, and maybe we have some Subaru guys out there that could give us maybe some pointers on this. But right in the middle of the screen, number of cleaning executions for VVT self-recovery. So I did do some research on those particular data PIDs for Bank 1, Bank 2, or however they denote them. It might be intake and exhaust. Intake exhaust. Sorry, I'm a little rusty here. This is a strategy that I know Toyota and a couple other manufacturers use. If the VVT system is commanded to advance or move a cam in one direction or another and doesn't see it move in a certain amount of time, it will hammer the oil control valve on and off rapidly. It's literally trying to knock the phaser or the stuck pin or the oil control valve or the sludge loose to get the system to work again. So number of cleaning executions for VVT self-recovery is at 0 in this particular car. It's never needed to self-recover, or it's never been able to self-recover, one or the other. This was a known good car. But when I saw that and I read the data, I thought to myself, man, the next time I have a Subaru in, or somebody calls me on a Subaru and it's got a cam crank correlation code, I want to know what these numbers are. Because if they're 0, to me, what I am thinking that this data could be interpreted, and I might be wrong here, I would love to hear other people's opinions. If the numbers are 0, this system, this car that has a cam crank or a VVT code, has never been able to knock itself loose. It is a hard fault. It went out of time, or it has a problem and it hasn't been able to recover. and I'm chasing a hard fault. But if those numbers are anything other than 0, if they're 5 or 55, well, then this is a system that has, on more than one occasion, had to knock itself loose. And maybe before I do any type of mechanical repairs, that's something I want to keep in mind. Maybe I need to take a look at the oil change sticker and see how many thousands of miles it's overdue for an oil change. Maybe I need to document that, that it appears this car has had an ongoing problem. It was just a data pit I've never seen before. I don't know if other manufacturers have it. I haven't seen it, but I thought, wow, that's a cool thing to know that's available and something we need to keep an eye on. I didn't have a chance to break this car and get it to try and recover or anything. So, I had to be nice.
That's something that you might want to look also when you're in that mode 6 enhanced data.
Yes, I wish I had this car more, but I was collecting data for an air conditioning class, and I only had a limited amount of time on it. So I got to revisit that one.
Now, how long did it take you actually to edit these slides to get the spelling correct? Because you've been through like 6 slides in a row, not one spelling error. So
I chose wisely. I know who signs my paychecks. All right. So I did promise I would make fun of Tanner. Here's where I get to make fun of Tanner.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, everybody quiet.
I'm not going to say anything they don't already know. He's short.
Just keep it short.
All right. I'm going to have to speed up here to get through everything.
Just remember, we only have a little amount of time.
All right. So, oh, man. All right. So I'll try to keep this brief.
This is a really short class, Rich.
2015 Ford Fusion. Tanner was chasing a fueling issue, and he put up a waveform in our messenger chat of that screen you're seeing right there. And he said, man, what a pain in the butt it was to get this waveform because the fuel pump control module's in the trunk. So, of course, we all asked the question, who gave him the boost to get up into the trunk? But the reason he was going after the fuel pump command signal was because Ford's pinpoint tests direct you to. And I will say Tanner fixed the car, and I don't remember the exact problem with the car, but he figured it out. But I did a little digging, and it's not just this Ford Fusion. I've gone through multiple Ford pinpoint tests on multiple makes and models, and Ford mentions the fuel pump command signal over and over and over again, makes no mention of the fuel pump monitor signal. And to me, because I know that's there, I think, and I know it shows up in scan data, it's at least worth a look. Before I climb into the trunk to collect a waveform, maybe I want to see what's there on the scan tool.
It's worth a small look.
It's worth a short, quick look.
Okay, okay.
All right. So anyway, so the fuel pump command signal is a pulse width modulated signal that the PCM sends to the fuel pump control module to tell the fuel pump control module what to do. The fuel pump control module responds with its own signal. So here we see fuel pump duty cycle output from PCM. Now, those numbers on your screen change for year, make, model, and engine. So what's on the screen there applies to just those vehicles. And based on that command, the PCM can turn the pump on, turn it on at a specific speed, or turn it off. Now, the one that Ford doesn't mention in their pinpoint tests that's available is the fuel pump control module. I just blanked out there. Fuel pump monitor signal. The module, the fuel pump control module, can respond to the PCM. He can really only say 3 things. He can say, I understand and I'm doing what you ask. He can say, I don't know what you're talking about. You're giving me an invalid signal. Or he can say, I see a problem with the wiring or the fuel pump itself. At the bottom there, it says, indicates the fuel pump control module is detecting a concern with the secondary circuits. What they mean by secondary circuits is the wiring out to the fuel pump or the fuel pump itself. So if you got a car in, it has a fueling issue, it's crank no start, there is on Fords. I know this isn't true on Euro, Chris, but on Fords, there is often a low side fuel pressure sensor and a rail pressure sensor. If we've got no fuel pressure, before we break out the scope, let's at least take a look at scan data. Fuel pump 1 is fuel pump command to the fuel pump driver module. Fuel pump monitor, fuel pump driver module's response back to the PCM. In the case of this car right here, fuel pump command of 75% is, hey, turn the fuel pump off. On this particular car, a response of 40% is the fuel pump driver module saying, I got you, I understand, I'm doing what you ask. But if the car is coming from a body shop, well, and it was in an accident, well, then the restraint control module can tell the BCM to tell the PCM to tell the fuel pump driver module to turn off. And those numbers would show up right there as to why the fuel pump wasn't being commanded on. So it's, again, just a quick little short talk about some of the scan data that is available to us.
Now, why is it reporting 92 psi if the fuel pump is off?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that. Low side fuel pressure is 90.4. Fuel rail pressure is 92.8. What's the engine load?
0.
So what is this engine right now?
Off.
It is key on, engine off.
Gotcha.
Fuel pump was commanded on to build that pressure.
Or your scan tool is lying to you.
Or my scan tool is lying to me. No, I know this is key on, engine off.
Well, go back to the slide and you can show them that 75% is a valid signal for key on, engine off. Normal operate right in the middle.
Yeah, no, this right here. Let me make sure. I have the wrong information here.
Uh-oh.
Valid off duty cycle.
Move on quickly. Abort.
Wait, let me see here. It was 2015 Fusion, right?
Sure.
I've got the wrong. Now remember, I said these numbers change, make and model specific. I grabbed a chart from the wrong engine, Fusion.
That's because it's not on the new charts.
So,
well, let's see.
Because I will tell you this, on that particular screen right there, 75% is the command to turn the pump off. It's not a 0 means turn the pump off. 75%.
It's a valid off.
That is a valid off signal. And the 40% is the fuel pump driver module saying, I got you, I turned the pump off. So that's
man, I'm sorry.
I know. No. You know what? I realize now. When I went to Ford service information, I probably wasn't too concerned because I knew I wouldn't have the time to go deep into the specific numbers.
This is a really good reason to consult your service information.
Yes, and everybody
said you wouldn't assume is off.
And not that we get sideways, Richard, but I know that CTI teaches. They did a lot with EcoBoost a couple years ago, right? And one of the reason it changes from one model to the next has to do with whether the vehicle has event notification or not, right?
Yes. Yeah. Event notification signal is the electronic form of the inertia switch. And if we go back here, now I'm starting to do CTI class. I have to watch myself here. Yeah, right here, 40%. Depending on the vehicle, this duty cycle indicates the fuel pump control module is receiving an invalid event notification signal from the restraint control module. But for all of these other cars, this duty cycle is a calibrated off, meaning it's a, hey, yeah, we're doing what you asked and we're turning the pump off.
And the other point that I wanted to make, I think the point you're trying to make, and I don't know if it's clear yet, which you probably haven't got to it, is that those scan tool PIDs that you're getting is exactly what you would see when you scope those circuits.
Exactly. If I went back to here and I think there it is at the bottom, you can see the duty cycle that Tanner was reading on the fuel pump command signal. And it was a good signal. And the fuel pump monitor signal on that particular car he was working on was responding properly also. So it was not related to the fuel system. He might have been able to look at the scan data and go, oh, it's doing what it's supposed to. Let me move on to something else. Because if the fuel pump monitor was getting bad information, he would be giving a 20% duty cycle there, which is what I call the what you talking about, Willis signal, meaning the fuel pump monitor doesn't understand what he's being asked to do, and he just turns the pump off because he doesn't know any better. All right. Do we have time for my last one? Are we running out of time here?
Yeah, man, go for it.
Go for it. All right.
Tonight's going to be shorter than any other night, and we actually have cool case studies. So I say we.
That's true. All right. So, all right. So I get to bring up PJ Walter here, but I'm not going to beat him up. He, there was a discussion on one of the waveform groups on Facebook about 8-channel scopes, and PJ had said, "Man, I would have loved to have an 8-channel scope to fix this Toyota Tacoma that I was chasing." So it caught my eye when he said Tacoma, because I have a buddy who was chasing a problem with a Tacoma, and I sent him a message. I said, "Hey, what was going on?" And he says, "Oh, I had a Tacoma with an intermittent no crank problem, and the the problem was so intermittent, it was happening once every 3 weeks." So PJ fixes it with a scope, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with what he did. I'm going to redraw this wiring diagram so it's a little easier to follow, but basically we've got our ignition switch. There are 2 separate B positive powers going in, 2 individual switches coming out. One of them goes through the neutral safety switch and eventually makes it to the control side of the starter relay. The other one goes through the relay once it's turned on directly to the starter. So if you were to hook up your scope, you would need multiple channels to check this entire system out. There is no better reason to hook up a scope than chasing an intermittent problem. If you only get 1 chance every 3 weeks to catch the problem, we better have every channel we could possibly hook up to it. So I think, and PJ can correct me if he's out there, but I think what PJ did was he used his own Autel scope and the Toyota Pico scope. So he had 8 channels on this car. So
he's out there and silently judging you, just letting you know.
That's fine. That's fine. I intentionally put this one in last because this car was fixed properly with a scope. But we'll get there. Anyway, so, he's got a channel or maybe 2 to be positive. He's got to monitor the switch out. He needs to monitor in and out of neutral safety switch. He needs to monitor the starter relay, and eventually he catches the problem. Eventually he catches that the neutral safety switch is failing. So the reason that this caught my eye was I have a friend down here in Florida. He runs a shop local to me. He is chasing the car with the exact same problem, a Toyota Tacoma with the exact same problem. He doesn't have an Autel scope. He doesn't have a Pico scope. He has barely mastered the test light. And he knows who I'm talking about, and he would admit he's not the electrical guru. So if I call my buddy and say, "Hey, I got a friend, a Toyota Master Tech up in Pittsburgh, and he's got the same problem you have on the same car, and he found out it was the neutral safety switch," what do you think my buddy's going to do?
Put one in.
Yeah, he's gonna shotgun one in and hope for the best. I don't want to give him silver bullets. What I really originally did was brought up a wiring diagram, and what I wanted to say to my buddy was, "Hey, break out that multimeter, dust it off, and put some batteries in it, and test this purple wire going in and this blue wire coming out of the neutral safety switch. Let me at least give him some direction to try to find the problem himself. So maybe he can learn a little bit here." But as I'm digging through this wiring diagram and trying to figure out wire colors, something jumps out at me. And the thing that jumped out at me was the PCMs involved. Now, that makes sense. PCM needs to know the engine is turning over, but here's our ECM. And we can see it's getting an input from the ignition switch on the NSW terminal, but it is also getting information on the blue wire on the STA terminal. So the PCM is seeing the ignition switch output and the neutral safety switch output at the same time. So now I know that Toyota is pretty good about terminals of the ECM, and we can see down here STA and NSW. And I could send my buddy this document and say, hey, break out the multimeter, look for these specific voltages at this specific time. But I thought, I wonder if that's available on data. And again, Toyota data list, active tests. It is a list of all of the scan data, what it displays, known good values. One of the really cool things I've seen on a lot of the late model Toyota service information is real world values. Is, hey, here's what this data PID could display, and this is what we found on a normal known good car. So there's good information there. And Toyota tells you right at the top of the list. I've seen this on so many of these data lists. By reading the data list displayed on an intelligent tester, you can check values, including those of the switches, sensors, and actuators without removing any parts. Read the data list as a first step of troubleshooting is one method of shortening diagnostic time.
Amen.
Yeah, exactly. My favorite part of that is without removing any parts. I'm lazy. I want to sit in the driver's seat and look at pretty pictures. So
Well, we had 99 watching, and now it's 98. So I think PJ left.
I already said he fixed the car. He should be. All right. So it is available on data. There is NSW and STA. Call my buddy and I tell him, hey, I know he has a launch. Hook up your launch. Tell me if you can find these two data pins. Yep. Start the car and tell me what happens. Well, he says, oh, when it's cranking, they both went to on. Okay, great. I want you to watch those two data pins. And when the car acts up, tell me what's going on. And my thinking is, let me see if I can get, there we go. If he turns the key and the starter doesn't engage and NSW goes to on and STA stays at off, where's the problem?
In between there.
Yeah, it's a neutral safety switch or wiring in between those two. If he turns the key, the starter doesn't engage, and both of them are off, where's my problem? Or at least where's my direction?
In front of the module there.
Further up. Yeah.
Yep.
Now, we're not monitoring this wire here. This is the one thing we don't know is the dark green to the light green wire. But again, from the driver's seat, we might get an idea of what is going on. So 2 weeks later, my buddy calls me and says, well, that was a complete waste of time. And now I'm heartbroken. I'm like, oh, I thought I was so smart by just, giving them those data PIDs. What happened? Oh, it's acting up right now. Okay. And when I turn the key, both NSW and STA go to on. Well, is that a waste of time?
Not at all.
Thank you, Chris. What do we know about the neutral safety switch?
That it passed the test.
Yeah, it's working.
It's working. It is working. That's not the problem. The problem has to be further on down. Now, I will tell you, he's already replaced the ignition switch and the starter more than once. So he's already shotgun parts at this car. If both of them go to on, the problem is further on down, and the problem turned out to be the relay. He pulled the relay apart, and the contacts on the switch were just destroyed. I don't know if this guy went mudding or something with it and filled it up with water, but it was a relay, and we didn't need a scope. Now, PJ fixed the car with a scope. The customer is happy. He did his job. My buddy down here in Florida, he fixed the car. It took a while, but we got a direction with a scan tool after he shotgunned a bunch of parts at it, but that's beside the point. So my whole point with these 3 or 4 examples, beyond just making fun of Tanner, was there's absolutely nothing wrong with scoping all the things. Keep on scoping all the things in the name of efficient diagnostics. There is nothing wrong with using your scope, but it might not be a bad idea to do more than just scan all of the scan data, to actually read and understand the data, because it might direct you to the exact spot that you need to hook up your scope.
Let's have a reason to scope all the things.
Exactly.
Yeah, Rocco just asked me a question though. He wanted to know is this easier to sell it to the customer this way when on the scope you can print out something that, makes it look really good for the customer, or do you just want to hit the print button and have the scan data?
Well, I mean, honestly, if you showed the customer a waveform or scan data, would they understand any of it?
No, but the waveform looks like a heartbeat.
Yeah, I guess they can equate that, but
You could graph your NSW and STA,
that's true,
and then
that's true.
then your engine RPM.
We could
Hey,
graph
I
our
like it,
scan
I like
data.
it.
There we go. Yeah,
And
graph
or-
your scan data.
Yeah.
Either way, you've documented proof of your testing. Whether it's
Oh, I
scope
heard
or
a COVID
scan
cough.
data. It's time to go.
I'm germexing right now.
So yeah, by all means, keep on using your scope, but there are so many guys out there that bought or their shop bought a very, very, very expensive scan tool, and they use it as a code reader. And that always blows me away with all of the information, all of the other tests available. I will put one shameless plug out there. Tomorrow night, Jim Kokonis is doing an AC class, and it focuses on using scan data and just the tests and data available to you might be a better place to go than just hooking up the machine.
Awesome. Hey, Rich.
That's tomorrow night. Yes.
Go back to that diagram real quick.
Oh boy.
Whatever. Nothing's better than doing a 2.5 hour evac and recharge on a 1, 2, 3, 4 YF.
All right.
Come on.
So
now.
here we go. Hold on 1 second here.
All
Hold on.
Are you drawing things on my wiring diagram?
No, he's not.
I am going to draw.
It has been
So-
relatively professional up until this point. So
Well, what I wanted to say is, I mean, because of the scan data, you brought the problem to right around here, which eliminate which.
okay. All
eliminate-
right. So all right. So anyway.
Thank God.
Jeez. Thank you. All right. Good night. Are
I
we
was
done?
concerned.
I was waiting so long.
I'm glad you could hold it in until 10:30.
When you said that sounded relatively involved, are you talking about like a family reunion thing or?
All right. So
All right.
how do we go from there? How do we recover?
Well, it's,
All right. Good night.
So are we going to get everybody from the Techtalks to come up, or is our next one going to?
yeah,
be more?
good point. I think we're
Bryn,
going
you
to
got
try
two.
to do.
We'll do a whole night of Bryn.
Nobody wants that, not even myself.
We all want that.
No, I think we're planned on doing a couple each live stream, and I know we said last time was 2 weeks ago. We said we'd probably do one the following week, and we missed a week. So look for the next one, though. We're going to do at least 2 more on the next one. We have Justin Morgan, Keith Williamson, myself, and Chris Groff. So we're gonna do. We're gonna do those. I'm not what's happening here.
Why does that one balloon look like a peanut?
Did somebody just write congratulations on your screen?
Happy birthday,
After,
Bryn.
excuse me. I'm sorry to infected you guys.
I don't see the balloon reaction.
We get ours done here, then we have a video where we have all of the important ones to share with you. Just kidding. No, we did video. We told you we videoed the session live, and we're going to share that, but we wanted to kind of recreate it here first. So the next 2 or 3 live streams, we're going to have Chris Groff. We're going to invite Keith Williamson to come on, and I'll do at least one of mine, and
Now,
then.
When he said all the important ones in the recording, mine got cut off. So he's right on the money.
And my second one,
Well,
where I
Well,
totally forgot to kind of make the point that I
You know, to fair, you really maybe you can do it fully here.
yeah, that would be great. Actually,
It was just a build up.
it was Yeah. Anyways, that's it, man. Anybody else have anything to add?
Mike wanted to say something.
Hold on, keep Mike muted. Let's make him laugh again. Everybody, Mike. We'll leave the fact that the way he puts his phone makes his head look like a giant nipple.
Can we, can't
There
we
he goes.
unmute him? We can unmute him, can't we?
No, it's better to have him laugh in silence because it's hilarious.
Well, his laugh is,
His laugh is
silenced
silent.
anyway. Yeah. It's like a mouse squeak.
There he goes. There he goes.
What the heck?
Now we're looking at a nipple at the ceiling.
You guys ever wonder if we look like this?
Oh, we need to do one that way.
That would be awesome.
I get to be animal.
Is Brian the bear? Because that really looks like Brian. Go back again. That bear looks like Brian. Oh, where is he? Yeah, that bear is Brian. Look at that guy.
The top
Well,
left,
who are you?
Yeah, top
who are
left.
you, Chris? Which one's you?
Me?
top right.
Bottom left.
Yeah, top right. Top right. That's me. And the bottom middle. That's Mike. Oh, well.
What do we think, guys? At least next week or the following week, right? But do another one.
If we could squeeze in between the plethora of
No doubt.
webinars out there,
Yeah.
you'll
I
see us
told
for
you.
15 minutes on Wednesday.
This is awesome. Learning while we're eating cereal and not wearing pants. It's pretty spectacular.
I don't have pants.
You're eating
Third.
cereal?
I did. I ate.
But in
Jealous.
Our
Our Canadian
serious-
friends sent us
Yeah.
some maple Cheerios.
Wow, look at that.
Wow.
in all
I gotta
serious
find
note,
some
though,
Canadian
it's-
friends.
In all seriousness, there's some really great training opportunities there. Take advantage of them.
Yes,
Please.
and free or not, jump into them because there's always good.
Did anybody share like the
Yeah.
cool things they're doing with their extra time
Absolutely.
right now? We asked that. I'm
Wait,
I'm
you guys
pretty
have
sure
extra
I
time?
Sure.
asked.
Only me.
I know.
I guess we don't.
No.
They're essential.
not me.
Richard, you're like actually finishing your house right now, are you?
It's unbelievable. There's a whole lot of work getting accomplished on my Sprinter. I mean the house.
I mean Call of Duty. I mean the Sprinter. I mean the house.
yeah, exactly.
Speaking of
Yeah.
Call of Duty, you getting on?
All of you guys are like freaking skilled first-person shooters now, huh?
Well, some of us.
Not me.
Yeah. Not me. All right, we do need to wrap it up though, because
Yep.
we did promise
Yeah.
we weren't going to run it
Yep.
super
Yeah,
late.
yeah.
All
Now
right.
we're getting into Call of Duty talk.
Should I
and we
do the
don't do that.
outro with my pants off and just walk away embarrassed?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
there we go.
Please.
Yeah.
We
I do
wanna
have my
finish this on
American
a very
flag.
professional note.
I do
As
have my
one who's seen
American
that in
flag
person?
boxers on.
As one who's seen that in person, please do that.
All right, let's
P-
call it.
PJ, what's funny about that is you guys heard about that before I did.
Heard about what?
PJ wrote,
Yes.
Keith Perkins is teaching a webinar as well, right? I found out today.
Yeah,
Oh, I
congratulations.
knew 2 days ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I was.
well, I think
I was
Keith, you're-
voluntold.
Keith is next week, and I think I'm the week after. So
Can we say
Yeah.
what they are?
I don't know what it is.
We're
know-
starting preparing for that.
I do know that mine will be electrical test tools,
It's a look
electrical
behind-
testing.
A look behind the curtain, folks.
Yeah.
I do know I'm going over an ADOS case study.
Cool.
One that was a vehicle I worked on. That the vehicle actually ended up going into 3 CTI classes.
Cool.
It took me 6
So-
months to fix the car because of how much stuff had to be done.
So check out our website for links to CTI, WTI, and everybody
Mhm.
else.
Yeah, there's an awesome calendar on there that you can go and check stuff out. And
Yeah,
That's
36 entries for just the month of April for webinars.
Yep,
That's
trainedbytext.com, and then there's a webinars link. I posted a link earlier in the chat.
That's what I was going to say. Did we already do that? But
Yeah, I posted a link to that. I posted a link to Brian Mann's website. I posted a link to every website but my own. Which I
We'll,
should-
eventually, we'll eventually get your website on our website.
I know it's so funny. There's nothing about it. I never even think of it. Not until the last month have I thought about even bringing it up ever.
So
All right. Well, let's end it.
Y'all have a good
Alright.
evening.
Everyone have a great
See ya.
night, and please
Thanks
be
for coming.
safe. Practice good hand washing. Like, in all seriousness, no, all jokes aside, please take care of yourselves. Be healthy. Be safe.
And wash your
Yes.
face.
Yeah.
Doctors say wash your face, not just your hands.
And
Watch your ass.
maintain social
That's-
distancing.
I
I
wasn't
think
gonna-
like 50 proof sprayed in the back of your throat, or 3
They're-
times a
Down-
day.
down to go.
They're actually
Everclear.
using grain alcohol right now because it's 90% alcohol. They're actually using grain alcohol, ethanol.
Great eye wash. Great eye
Whatever
wash.
works.
Yeah.
Moonshine's coming back.
There you go.
Save us all.
All right.
This is not about coronavirus, guys. That's
Yeah.
it. Done.
No, not at all.
Yeah, that's right.
Good
All right,
night.
ladies and
Stay
gents.
safe.
Have a
Good
good
night.
one.
Toodles.
Bye.
Bye.